It's the left versus the right. In the right corner, it's heavyweight king Curtis Sliwa. In the left corner, it's Anthony Weiner. It's a 77 WABC debate. Heavyweight slugfest. On New York's news and talk station, 77 WABC.
So welcome to another special edition of Left versus Right. Anthony Weiner on your left, Curtis Sliwa on your right. It's a special edition because this is the end of the holiday week for many Jews. And as a Jew, I want to say if I have done anything over the last year to offend you in any way, accept my apologies and my amends.
Well, remember, this Tashlik, you had 10 days between Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur to go and put breadcrumbs in a moving
cast off
body
your
of
sins.
water, right? To at least buy yourself a little bit of time. I'm concerned about you, Anthony, but I'm more concerned about Sid Rosenberg.
Well, that's probably right. You know, it's funny. One of the things that I find you people have, it's a very emotional time of year. But the prayers, I find, are very good. They say, I've done all these things. You flag yourself, I've done all these things. And then at the very end of the prayer, you say, and God, forgive me because I'm sure I'm going to do them again next year. So Sid is probably focusing on that. So before we get into the left versus right element of this, there's a lot to talk about. But give us, our listeners, a little update on Anthony. How is he doing? I think now many of us have seen the videotape. It's quite a, he really took quite a licking, and it was not a small thing. You know, when you read the first stories, you're like, all right, maybe it was just a scrape. He really did get roughed up pretty good. Is he doing okay now?
He's slowly recovering. It's more psychological than it is physical. He took 5 stitches to the lip and the inner side of your mouth. Anybody who's ever had that, I've had it. It takes a long time to heal because your natural predisposition is to drink, to eat, to speak, and it never properly heals. So it's going to be with him for a while. But I'm more concerned about the psychological effects. He's been raised so that he can defend himself and others. He's gone through the guardian angel training. He graduated. But nothing prepares you for something like you saw.
Right.
And right now the world is seeing, as it goes viral, where Anthony is on the ground and being pummeled. I mean, kicked and punched and stomped on. Any one of those shots, especially to his head, could have killed him. And as you originally said when I released this video, oh, my God, Governor David Patterson.
Yeah.
It's like a whirling dervish in there throwing people around. It's like he can't see, and yet I attribute Anthony being saved from really serious injury or maybe even death to how Governor David Patterson physically intervened and really started throwing some of these thugs around.
I mean, the video shows the back of David Patterson. At first, he's trying to hold people back. But I think then he realizes, and again, I mean, for our listeners around the country, he's basically blind. He sees shapes and he can see a little bit, but not very much. And then he goes into just tossing some of these kids aside, and it really was the difference because when he did that, they all kind of scurried around. The one thing I want to understand a little bit was the role of the adults in this. The way you told the story last week and this week on the Rip and Read, there was an altercation, but then there was a lull period between, and then it reoccurred around the McDonald's. Have those 2 adults been charged, and does the videotape seem to show that they were involved, or is it not clear what this? Because I wasn't able to make out all the different figures.
Yeah, the 2 adults who should have been calming the teenagers down. Because, look, I don't care whether you're rich teenagers, poor teenagers, white or black, you're all knuckleheads at some point.
Right.
They're not mature. I don't hold them totally at fault the way I do the adults. There was a 40-year-old man who works for NYCHA and a 34-year-old woman who works for NYCHA. They were hanging outside of that McDonald's. They saw everything transpire. The teenagers coming up to Anthony, calling him, why were you threatening to snitch me out? Because, in the streets, snitches get stitches and end up in ditches. That's what caused this. Anthony told them to get off a fire escape. They were on the 2nd floor of a tenement next to the building that he and David Patterson and my former wife Mary live in. And he said, and if you don't get down, I'm going to call the cops. Well, that's something they're not going to deal with. But it didn't result in an altercation right away.
Right.
It's like 45 minutes later, David.
But were these 2 adults connected to those kids, or were they just they're the troublemakers themselves?
They're just hanging out. It's a Friday night. It's after work. And they decided to jump in, not to calm the situation down. Now, look, I think they had to have known that this was David Patterson, and if they didn't, they see he's a blind man.
Yeah.
But they punched David Patterson, the male, in the face. The female punched Anthony in the face. In my first conversation with him, he goes, Dad, you told me never hit a woman. I did.
Yeah.
But nowadays in the streets, sometimes the women are real roughnecks. They're as tough, if not tougher, than the men. And that's what triggered it. Then the teenagers decided to get in and start kicking, punching. So the adults were not a good role model at all.
So tell me about the response of the police and the district attorneys.
Outstanding. They moved quickly, obviously high profile because of David Patterson.
Right, and you.
But they put out the wanted posters. They put their video out so you clearly identified who these people were. The teenagers, their parents brought them in. 2 were charged with gang assault. 1 was released because he never got involved physically. All he did was taunt.
Right.
Then the 2 adults were arrested, and they were charged with gang assault. Their unique defense with their legal aid attorneys was, no, we were the peacemakers. We were trying to calm it down. It was actually that kid, Anthony Sliwa, who's a black belt, and Governor David Patterson, who started this. And I'm like, where did they come up with the fact that Anthony's a black belt?
Was the whole thing captured on videotape, everything from beginning to end?
Pretty much everything. By a citizen. That was then posted by the NYPD. Now,
interesting.
I was not going to release it at first. But when they go into court and they're claiming that Anthony and Governor David Patterson are starting the fight, then I have to let everybody see, because then I'm getting a lot of calls. Oh, well, I see. It's not exactly the way.
Well, it's also, if there is this notion that they're saying there's not evidence that attaches it. I mean, look, first of all, there's one element of this that's kind of mundane. There's dust-ups with kids all the time.
Yes.
And you got to discipline them, et cetera. But they're by and large, and thank God, this one didn't result in anything seriously. But there is a problem that starts happening. If you have adults, there's a reason. I know people don't like to hear this. There's a reason we charge kids with different crimes, and we prosecute them differently than we do adults. The idea that the kids don't know better. They're learning a lesson. The adult part of this is the part that made my blood boil. Like, if you have a group of kids, you've done it before, especially being a guardian angel. You say, all right, kids, move it along here, just whatever it is. But hopefully it'll work out. Have you gotten any sign yet about? I mean, the lawyer was the defender was very aggressive about we're the victims here.
For the adults, yes,
right.
We don't know what Alvin Bragg's assistant district attorneys are going to do. There's going to be a grand jury. Hopefully they'll get charged with gang assault. Look, I've been in a lot of situations like that where I've been on the ground and they've pummeled me, and I've seen others where the guardian angels and I came to someone's aid. That is your classic definition of gang assault. So
what do you think, before we move on, what do you think would be the right outcome, the just outcome in this case? Do you want to see these people
the right outcome is move forward and charge the adults. Obviously, the juvies you're going to treat differently. Maybe there's a lesson for them to be learned.
Right.
It is good their parents brought them in, although they probably realize, oh, son, out of all the people, the governor, former governor, David Patterson, and then Anthony, the son of America's #1 vigilante.
Yeah.
We're going down to the police station right now.
But also, very often, parents, they are embarrassed. They do, they do want their kids to do the right thing. All right, so that's the update on that. And again, before we get into it's been a heavy week. Congratulations to your Yankees on making the World Series.
Oh, wait, this is
I'm making the American League Championship Series. My Mets. I don't want to go any further than that because
I have great knockers. You're praising the Yankees, Mets. Met fans hate Yankee fans.
I root for the Mets and anyone playing the Yankees. However, if there is going to be a path that we're going to follow, the Mets, I wouldn't mind it going through the Bronx. We have to cleanse ourselves from 2000. But by the way, there was a moment I went to Game 3. Who gets up to bat to pinch hit? Roger Clemens' son. Gets up, and I had a feeling of deja vu. And I was yelling to Minea. I think Minea was pitching at the time. Throw the bat at him, just even the score.
I think Roger Clemens' son, if I'm not incorrect, played for the Staten Island Ferry Hawks.
Did he? That's
I
interesting.
believe so. Roger Clemens came to one of the games because John Catsimatidis owns the team. At least they played.
He actually got a timely. I think he got a timely hit in Game 2 that the Phillies won. All right, let's talk about a much heavier subject. The hurricanes have now passed a lot of devastation in North Carolina, in Georgia, and in Florida. Actually, in Florida, maybe they spared the worst, but still, enormous amount of work. And usually, historically, and you're a historian, hurricanes bring us together. When you're out trying, when I remember during Superstorm Sandy, Republicans, Democrats, no one's asking each other their party. They were rallying together. But there are sometimes political consequences of these storms. We know what happened with George Bush with Katrina. And you were telling me before we went on the air the story of how Superstorm Sandy may have impacted Obama closing the gap in 2012 when the polls had been a little shaky. That might have been a turning point for him. Tell that story.
I really thought that Superstorm Sandy sealed the deal for Barack Obama. Prior to that, remember, he had that first debate in the Mile High City, Denver. He looked a little bit like Joe Biden did.
He had a bad debate.
Younger version.
Yeah.
Romney was like jabbing a left hook, right? Everybody said, Micah, what happened to Barack Obama? Is he ill?
Yeah.
He had a really bad debate, and I think Romney got really pumped up. And the polls were indicating it was neck and neck. Then Superstorm Sandy hits. Barack Obama has FEMA in place. They're ready to move. There's great cooperation, especially with the hardest hit area, which was Jersey, all along the Jersey Shore.
Well, and Rockaway. Let's not forget New York.
All of Jersey Shore, which is their economic, the whole economic strength of Jersey. And remember, Chris Christie thought he was on his way to the White House. Because remember, he gave the opening address in Tampa where they had a hurricane
also
offshore.
A hurricane.
They had to cancel that day. I think he did 45 minutes talking about himself and didn't even introduce Mitt Romney.
Didn't even say Mitt Romney's name.
But
that's exactly right.
The point is that Barack Obama and the federal government came through. FEMA was available. In Jersey, which suffered so much damage, President Obama came. He picked up Chris Christie, who was going round the clock with that fleece sweater. He never changed it. Took him in Marine Helicopter 1 from Brigantine, south of Atlantic City, up to Point Pleasant and back to look at the damage. Said, whatever you need, Chris, you got it, which is what a president is supposed to say.
Correct.
And then Shamu El Jefe, Chris Christie, did the one thing he would take back if he could. He hugged the president.
Now, that was not a wrong thing to do. As a matter of fact, at the time, people were saying this is the best of America, Republican giving a Democrat a hug. It only became an issue when he decided he wanted to run in the Republican Party, which suddenly saying thank you to someone across the party lines is not allowed anymore.
I think, as we've seen DeSantis handle it, first with Trump as president and now with Biden, a simple handshake.
I know, but that's just a sign that the times have changed. It used to not be the case that you could not even say thank you to a Republican.
You're a bit of a skinny guy. Obama's a skinny guy. Chris Christie almost squeezed the life out of him there. He was so joyful.
But isn't that amazing? What does that tell you about our politics today? That it is considered a death knell even to be seen hugging a Democrat. I mean, come on.
But you are right. This brings together both sides. All governors know you better not diss the president.
Unless you're Donald Trump.
Because he signs the checks.
I know, but unless you're Donald Trump.
Right.
As I just got done talking about on my show On the Middle, this is the time you're supposed to at least act like you're being bipartisan. Donald Trump went the other direction, making up stuff left and right, terrorizing people who didn't know if what he was saying was correct. I can't imagine that voters are going to reward him for that.
He did not say that the people stranded in Tampa were eating their dogs and cats. Would you give him credit for that? There are a lot of stranded animals.
But is there? He was just making stuff up left and right. And I just played a cut on my show of a caller to a talk show saying, I can't get my father-in-law to go get help because he thinks that FEMA's going to take his money or whatever it is. It's these lies. And then AI and the Internet is a cesspool of stuff people making.
But I think also Mayorkas should handle some of that. When he was on Air Force One with President Joe Biden heading to South Carolina and Florida to look at the damage, and he says, we've run out of money.
Well,
which, as you know, as a congressman, you can always find money hidden somewhere.
I know, but in fairness, they had just got done in Washington fighting over the extended resolution to continue the funding of the government, and the Republicans left and right said, we're not giving you money for things, including for FEMA. So, when you are the head of DHS, you're constantly lobbying for the next budget.
Understood.
So I get it was an inartful thing to say, but no one who really understood the problem and understands appropriations wouldn't know what he was saying. He's saying, listen, these emergencies are going to keep on happening. Let me ask you this. Do you think that it changes the dynamic? You talked about how this Hurricane Sandy reaction did change the dynamic in this race. Is this going to change at all, or are we so etched in stone where everyone is that it's not going to matter?
Understand this. We don't know Vice President Harris. We knew Hillary, because remember, you almost grew up with Hillary. You knew Joe Biden for 50 years. You knew Donald Trump. We still don't know Harris, most Americans. This would have been an opportunity now because she's starting to do public events, public interviews. Some people say soft, but at least she's available. Now, all the coverage is the misery that Americans are going through.
But she did what you would have recommended she do. Go down there, hold people's hands, let them cry, whatever it is, that picture of being a leader, whatever it was. But I think she did all of those things.
Coverage overwhelms the campaign. And I think the biggest signal to me that maybe they chose the wrong guy for vice president, Coach, said, sometimes I'm a knucklehead. It's okay. I don't find fault with that. But he's not a Shapiro. I think had they chosen Shapiro in Pennsylvania, they wouldn't be spending so much of their resources. Look, the crown prince of the Democratic Party, who I believe would get elected tomorrow if he ran, Barack Obama, is in Philadelphia trying to get black men to vote for Harris. That is a signal to me, you're worried that black men are not necessarily going to vote for Trump, but are going to stay home.
Yeah, I mean, look, I got to agree. I was, you and I have talked about this before. I was on Team Shapiro. You can write this story differently. You can write it that Shapiro would have been only in Pennsylvania, and that we would have been talking nonstop about Palestinians. You could make that argument. I'm not saying that issue's zero.
But I think he offsets her lack of ability to speak on certain subjects.
I think that's right. I also think that in today's political world, where 5 or 6 or 7 swing states, choosing a person from one of those swing states and just say, stay here, organize run my state like you're running one of your governor's races, I think that's a legitimate beef. I got to tell you something. I hadn't really noticed this until we're going to talk about Obama after the break, but Shapiro is a straight ripoff of the way that Obama talks. Have you seen him? It is like every pause, every gesture, and I guess that's what happened.
But
Maybe
he's good.
He's very good.
He's engaging.
I agree. He's a very good public speaker. He was very good at these rallies. He's been a very good governor. And when they've had their own emergencies, when they had a bridge.
Do you believe, now this is at least what we were told, and I believe partially it's true, that when it came down to the final two, the governor of Pennsylvania, Shapiro, and the governor Walz of Minnesota, that Shapiro went in and said to Team Harris, led by former Attorney General Eric Holder, I think this is the way you ought to be handling this. And that Walz came in and said, whatever you want, I'm here.
Well, the reporting that I've read that makes some sense is Shapiro also said, what's my role? What am I going to get to do? Because famously, vice presidents don't get to do very much. And also, I think that Harris, who is still probably a little insecure, she just rose to that place, probably was like, all right, settle down there, Junior. One thing that presidents don't want is ambitious vice presidents, right? She should know that better. So I think there's probably something to that. I know Walz. Walz is a classic kind of guy. Sit down, have a beer, make you feel liked, make you feel accepted and heard and everything else. I think that the pick is not going to be – I don't think it's going to be the problem, especially since Vance has spent a lot of time the last couple of weeks answering questions of his own. Well, when we come back, we're going to talk about the mother of all bullpen pitchers, Barack Hussein Obama, who has finally hit the campaign trail. This is Left versus Right. Anthony Weiner and Curtis Sliwa. We'll see you on the other side.
It's the left versus the right. In the right corner, it's heavyweight king Curtis Sliwa. In the left corner, it's Anthony Weiner. It's the left versus the right. In the right corner, it's heavyweight king Curtis Sliwa. In the left corner, it's Anthony Weiner. It's a 77 WABC debate. Heavyweight slugfest.
So welcome back to Left versus Right. Anthony Weiner on your left, Curtis Sliwa on the right. We're going to get to some of the New York City issues that Curtis is best known for. But we're going to do a little more of the presidential campaign. By the way, don't forget to tune in tonight. Curtis is on ABC, always broadcasting Curtis from the overnight 12 to 6, and then tomorrow from 8 to 10, he'll also be on. That's the animal news. That's the animal hour,
No,
right?
That's the extended rip and read. That's when Nancy breaks a lot of news after doing a week of research, followed by the animal welfare 10 to 11. A lot of stories about animals in desperate need in these hurricane areas.
Well, there have been some terrible videos of abandoned animals, but also some amazing stories about them. And I got to tell you, maybe it's just me now that I've adopted a dog. I watch those things a little bit more carefully. But let me talk to you about what we left at the break about. Barack Obama finally shows up, and it's the whole question about, do you want to be overshadowed? Barack Obama speaks in Pittsburgh on Thursday, and he was great. Relaxed, joking, really seeming to enjoy it. But his takeaway message, in addition to tweaking Trump wherever he could, because I think he knows that drives Trump bananas, he did seem to be carrying a message specifically for African-American men. And you've said it, I've said it. Ignore the polls. Watch what the candidates are saying when you want to know how they're doing. It sounded like they were really worried. Do you think they should be?
Yes. It's just like, remember when David Dinkins, the mayor, ran against Rudy Giuliani the second time. I looked at the analytics, and everyone said Staten Island, the turnout because of secession. No. I looked at Southeast Queens, black middle-class households. They had an unprecedented turnout the first time for the first black mayor, Dinkins, to be expected. The second time, they didn't come out and vote for Rudy. A lot of them just didn't
stayed home.
Come out. They stayed home. They were disappointed. I think for black males, they don't know enough about Harris. And there have been a lot of rumors out there about Harris that have not been addressed that get talked about in the barbershops. So the wives are on board. The elders in the community are on board. But your middle-aged black guy, when I talk to them, nah, I don't know. I can't deal with Trump, but, I don't know anything about this Harris. So it's almost as if they've done those same focus groups, and they don't want them staying home.
Yeah.
They're not so much fearful they're going to vote for Trump. More this time will, but not enough to make a difference.
Well, it also could be it is not about race, it is about gender. There's a huge gender gap in what the polling has been showing. Something like Harris up by 11 among women and Trump up 9 by men. Yep. You always want to have more women, a better gap, because they vote more. It could just be that the very gendered race that Trump is running. Remember Trump's convention, Kid Rock, MMA wrestlers. It's a very... You
forgot Hulk Hogan. To introduce him.
That's right. It's a very male-oriented campaign.
Totally machismo.
And it could be that reads... Look, Latino men also, we're not paying a lot of attention to that. They're also breaking for Trump.
It's the women in their community that vote. When you look at the analytics again, especially 55+, black women... It's almost like a religious vocation. They vote. Latino women vote. A lot of men talk a lot of trash no matter what race they're in. And I'll be in a household, and the guy will be talking, did you vote? What? Election day? No, it already passed.
Yeah.
Then you look to the wife, quiet, doesn't want to start an argument. Did you vote? Yeah. And say, last night, Biden.
Well... but here's the other thing. Remember, in 2016, there were a lot of finger-pointing at the black community in places like Milwaukee and places like Detroit. How come you didn't come out and everything else? I am already hearing a little bit of pushback on this Obama thing. When I say hearing, I mean seeing it online. A lot of African-American men said, don't get us, even if we do have 5 or 6 points better for Trump, it's still an 80% basically thing. You're 80% for Harris.
But they're smart to bring Barack Obama out. The Democrats are kicking themselves in their tuchus when, in 2000, here's Bill Clinton, Mr. Mississippi River states, Tennessee, Arkansas, Missouri, and Gore said, I don't want him there.
Yeah.
I want him working the black and Hispanic radio stations, TV. This guy would have been the difference. Al Gore, who lost his own state of Tennessee to Bush 43, would have become the president of the United States.
Do you think surrogates matter? Do you think anyone makes a vote based on that? Do you think it helps?
They are charismatic. It's like going to a church where you got a charismatic
Well,
preacher.
you have, I'll give you a chance. So that in the next week, you're going to have Bernie Sanders going to Wisconsin.
Yes.
You're going to have Bill Clinton going to rural North Carolina. You're going to have, obviously, Barack Obama. They may just keep him in Pennsylvania.
Living in Pennsylvania.
Just keep him in Pennsylvania. But I think endorsements don't matter that much. Maybe like in a city council race when Chuck Schumer endorsed me and I was one of 5 people, okay, that matters. Presidentially, all right, I got one for you. Is there anyone that you think that Donald Trump would like to have out there doing the same thing for him? Can you think of anyone?
No, because nobody should overshadow Donald Trump.
Also, no one could do that. That his appeal is so sui generis. It's like,
well, in the final phase of the campaign, look, he won the first election against Hillary because independent women broke for him. He lost to Biden because independent women voted against him. And this happens in the last 12 days. And now he can possibly lose this election because of the independent women. If he had a Nikki Haley, if he had more of these high-profile Republicans who are not hard right,
he just doesn't.
Into these
he doesn't have those people. I mean, look, here's the interesting thing. In a weird way, when this race was about Hillary Clinton, Trump won.
Yes.
When this race in 2020 was about Donald Trump, Biden won.
Yes.
When this race was about Joe Biden, Trump was winning.
It was a coronation.
And now, I kind of think the race, and this is why when people say just let Trump talk, now the more that this becomes about Trump, I think a lot of voters who are low information voters who just don't want the aggravate, don't want the headache, they may say, I've had enough of Trump, and they may turn to it. That's our hope. But that's not a good way to go into the final weeks of the campaign.
I think if I were an advisor to Harris, I'd say, look, we got to put a little meat on the bone. They're claiming you're too frivolous. You know, it's like a party girl almost. Like, okay, we know you're not the most super serious person in the world. You're never going to change that. But just subjects that you're strong at, focus on that.
I agree.
So even if it's just talking about abortion, she's extraordinarily strong on that. Trump not. He quivers. He wavers. So stick to the subjects you're good on. That reinforces your base, but it also gets the independent woman to say, yeah, I believe more in that. I'm not so sure Trump, if he's being influenced by these people on the far right, the holy rollers, who don't want any abortion.
No, I think I agree.
J.D. Vance, for rape, for incest, for the health of the mother.
Well, this is the downside of being an accidental candidate like Harris was. That from being on the campaign trail, you hone it in the fire. You get your message. Your mind starts to work. All right, here's the value statement of why I want to be mayor. Here's here's the contrast with the other guy, and here's the value statement there. You get tight like that. I just played a cut during my show where she was asked the question, is there anything you would have done differently than Biden? That's not a question that should be hard for you to answer.
Right.
You might have to dance a little bit,
sure.
but it's an opportunity for you to do your standard tough whatever it is. And she just basically didn't have an answer for it. I agree that this is not – what has been overshadowed, because we focus a lot on Trump, is the fact that Harris, when she talks, in my view, is very risk-averse. She's constantly thinking to herself, I'm not going to make a mistake. I don't want to make a mistake.
Yep.
I don't want to make a mistake. And what winds up coming out is a not persuasive argument. Now, it might not matter. Look, I always make the example of George Pataki, that I think that sometimes being a blanker slate when you're dealing with an unpopular opponent is all you need to be. That's not the situation here. She's got to bring in that 10% independent vote somehow, and that takes a sale.
Yeah, well, that's why focus on the issues you're good at, because there's not enough time for you to get good on the issues you're not good at. And to think that she's suddenly going to master these issues in the waning days of a campaign when there's so many other pressures, it's not feasible. And I know, just being a candidate in a small way as I was, everybody's telling you. You know that. You ran for mayor. Everybody's telling you, oh, you should do this, you should do that, you should say this. And I realize, quite frankly, a good campaign is 3 issues. A better campaign is 2 issues. The best campaign is if you can find that one issue.
Yeah.
Lee Zeldin almost rode that to victory. Right. Remember, he had a lot of baggage in New York State. He was pro-Trump, hardcore pro-life.
January 6th.
Second Amendment, right? You don't get 35% of New York City. You can't become the governor no matter how red the rest of the state is. And yet, he seized on that crime issue. And Hochul will never get rid of Eric Adams because he came to her rescue in those last 12
days. Well, we're
going
to talk about Adams in the third segment. But I just on this issue, one of the things that when I ran, whether it was for Congress or mayor, I always had an abiding kind of bumper sticker for why I was running. So for me, when I first ran for mayor, is New York should be the capital of the middle class. It was for me and my family, and I want it to be for every family. And here's 3 things that we need to do differently to make sure it stays up.
Yep.
Just a thing that's like, this animates me every day. Harris, okay, she's anti-Trump. We get that. She's going to get all the anti-Trump voters. You still need to make the sale. Now, I believe that people who are undecided at this point aren't paying that much attention. They're probably not listening to us right now. They're not reading the New York Times at the front. They're probably reading the back of the sports section, whatever it is. So it doesn't have to be amazing, but it does have to be a little bit more than she's giving them right now.
And election after election tells you the decision is made by the independents, those who haven't made up their minds in the last 12 days.
That's exactly. And a matter of fact, some of the data even shows the last few days.
Right.
Why
wouldn't you want to have that? Why is it you want to have an election where everyone has already figured it out 6 months in advance?
I know, but I have never seen, maybe you have, I've never seen an election as stable as this one. When Biden flamed out of that first debate, I'm like, okay. Then you have Harris coming in. Then you have assassination attempts. And all the while, it's one by two, by one, by two, by one. I've never seen it so stable.
It was a brilliant strategy of the DNC. Harris comes out, smiley face, something that Trump never is. He's dour.
Right.
Vance, right? Bulldog, right? And they came out with their spouses. That's the other thing. Yeah. Here's Harris. Her spouse is there. There's Coach. His spouse is there. You never saw the spouses of the Republicans, even though, boy, Melania and the wife.
Well, Vance's wife is a great story, but I think they couldn't do it because Melania doesn't want to be involved.
But also she's East Indian, right? Takes away that,
No, I agree, but they can't roll her out and have 3 people on stage.
But
you need Melania buying it.
If I were the Republicans, my advice, and Trump never takes advice, but my advice would be the last 2 weeks when the independent women have to make their choices, they're mostly independent women, some independent men, bring out the wives, let them introduce
Melania ain't
their
voting
husband.
for him, Curtis. Melania's not voting for Trump.
How do you know who she's voting for?
Look, she would be out there doing anything she's not doing. And by the way, do you see, she's getting apparently paid to do the appearances that she's doing. She doesn't want to. She's not voting for the guy.
She's getting paid. Let's say the last 2 weeks, you have your wife introduce you.
Who is? If Melania was going to do something to help her husband, you would have seen it by now. That's the convention. It's the standard convention role for her. She waved from the audience and then left.
I know, but I think in the last 2 weeks, they're going to look at the analytics.
Who's the they? You got to get the wife has to be willing to do it. She said, no, I ain't doing it.
I think you're going to see her in the last 2 weeks.
All right, I bet you
I think you're going to see J.D. Vance's wife, who's very impressive.
You can't have her and not Melania. You got to do both.
Understood.
And she's a great story.
I'm telling you, if it's eye candy also, it attracts attention.
Melania has had time and time again, the guy is an assassination attempt. She doesn't come out the next day. Honestly, she writes this crazy book where she says, I'm pro-choice. Come on.
Yeah, but
she's unwilling.
That helps if women are thinking, well, Trump, he's not the worst on the abortion issue.
Because she's with him.
But he's got his wife who may be influencing him not to go there. And
Where
we all
is she?
know that Donald Trump originally was pro-choice.
Yeah, I know, but where is Melania? We got to squint to see where she is. Come on. I have to tell you something.
My party's problems, all the candidates. Chris Christie was pro-choice. He's thinking of running for president, pro-life. Donald Trump, pro-choice. Thinking of running for president, pro-life. Rudy Giuliani, pro-choice. Thinking of running for president, pro-life. This is the issue that could cause defeat, not only for the presidential election, but down ballot, U.S. Senate.
But this
and
is
House.
why when Donald Trump says, everybody wanted me to repeal Roe v. Wade, actually, Republicans in their heart of hearts were fine with the way it was. They can fundraise off it, they can campaign on it, but they didn't want it to actually go away.
To add insult to injury, who finally speaks up, we finally hear him speak, Thomas, who said, now that we've done this.
I know.
Let's go.
There's a lot of other stuff.
Let's go after gay and lesbian.
And contraception. And
marital contraception, condoms.
That's exactly right.
What is this guy out of his mind? But not interracial marriage.
But that is the right. By the way, if anyone could have done it, could have dragged his party to be commonsensical on choice, to say whatever it is, Roe is not great, we're not crazy about it, but we believe in the law, whatever it is. He could have done it. He doesn't need the conservatives anymore. They have nowhere to go.
He did it with Barack Obama's health care. He did it. He did not completely go away. He doesn't even almost mention it any longer. He knows there's a fait accompli.
Yeah.
You might want to tweak it.
I know.
It's here to stay.
He has a concept of a plan.
And the other thing, neither side talking about this debt of $35 trillion. Both parties adding. All this campaign has been, we're going to give you more stuff free. Both sides. More free, free.
By the time this campaign is over, Donald Trump will have eliminated all taxes on everything. And we'll be right back on Left versus Right.
It's the left versus the right in the right corner. It's heavyweight king Curtis Sliwa in the left corner. It's Anthony Weiner. It's the left versus the right in the right corner. It's heavyweight king Curtis Sliwa in the left corner. It's Anthony Weiner. It's a 77 WABC debate. Heavyweight slugfest.
So welcome back to Left versus Right. Anthony Weiner on the left, Curtis Sliwa on the right. If you miss any part of this program or you want to get any of Curtis's very fine programs, you can get them on the Red Apple Podcast Network, anywhere that you get your podcast. At Rep Weiner is me on Twitter. You have an extensive TikTok following. You've got an Instagram following. What are your handles if anyone wants to follow you?
I have no idea. I'm a Luddite. Just find Curtis Sliwa.
Who does it for you, Anthony?
A combination. Nancy, my wife, is very good. But a guy, James Perone, who was part of my original campaign. He's brilliant. And if you don't know what you're doing, which is what I don't know, I can barely send an email. Leave it to people who know what they're doing.
Here's the funny thing about it is that when, Dominic and I, when we were doing the show, sometimes we would get excellent ratings, but suddenly something would blow up on TikTok for no particular reason, and we had no idea why. So having someone who understands that stuff.
Oh, completely.
The very first time Jordan mentioned anything about politics to me, it was because of a TikTok thing. So as much as I may not like it, it's controlled by China, it's ruining his attention span. It is doing it.
All the elected officials who want to do away with TikTok, most of them have their own TikTok accounts.
But this isn't on our rundown, but this is the contradiction, right? If you look the last week or so, all of the disinformation, all of the fake AI-generated pictures of, like, Donald Trump up to his knees in a suit carrying a flag through the floods, all of that stuff, as bad as it is still a place I learn stuff. It's still a place that I find out what's going on in my community. Sometimes you'll send me a thing. I'll learn something that's going on in my neighborhood from you sending me a clip faster than I will from the newspaper. But
see, I think there's an unwillingness to trust people, to be discriminating. When government gets too oppressive and doesn't want you to have access, you'll figure it out. But I trust the American people. Government does not.
I have to tell you something. I don't know what to think about this. At the same time, people criticized the New York Post for not running the Hunter Biden story for a little while. And then not the New York Post. They criticized the social media companies. Then you've got rampant disinformation around COVID. Now, today you have disinformation around where you can vote and where you can't vote. And if you're Elon Musk, you're putting your finger on the social media for one side and then editing out what the other side does. I don't know who to trust at this point. It's such a torrent of information. I guess the one thing I would say to people is do what I do, which is if I don't see something 3 or 4 sources, I don't touch it for a little while. Like I don't jump at anything. Sometimes I see politicians who like or repeat something that has been out there. We saw that Senator Lee from who this week retweeted out that photograph of that girl holding a puppy that turned out to be an AI-generated thing to criticize the Biden administration with. It's a mess. I think if you and I come back here in 10 years, it'll be better. But for now, it's just buyer beware.
Well, look, more information is not bad. It's if you don't trust the population, then who is going to be the arbiter of what's right and what's wrong?
I believe newspapers, editors.
Editors of newspapers?
I mean, they're going to get stuff wrong. They're going to get stuff right. But journalism, the way it was created, that we were taught about it in college.
It's not that way anymore.
Fair enough, but
everybody takes their own point of view. I'll give you a perfect example.
Yeah.
They're talking about Tish James running for mayor now. Clearly the preferred candidate of the New York Times.
Correct.
They call her a moderate Democrat. I see the 2 people who wrote it. I say, really? She may be many things, but she has never, ever been a moderate Democrat. It's almost as if the Times is positioning her. Everybody.
I'm surprised they use that word. That is, see, now if you're an editor, you take that word out.
Of course,
from the sentence.
She's never been a moderate.
Well,
Democrat.
that's not the issue. The issue is you're deciding what someone like.
Right.
For example. To the world, when I was a congressman, I was considered a very liberal guy because I advocated for single-payer health care. But when I got to Congress, a pro-Zionist, hire more cops, cut taxes on the middle-class guy, I'd probably be somewhere more towards the middle.
They didn't know where to box you after that.
No, but it's a matter of perspective.
Right.
And by the way, it's the same with our next subject, which is how all of this plays out in the mayor's race. Americans don't understand what New Yorkers understand. We're Democratic, we're blue. We're a fairly moderate electorate, right? Mrs. Kraplucha on Avenue N, her arm would fall off if she ever voted for a Republican. Right. But she's probably for the death penalty. She wants to hire more cops. She wants to drop as many bombs as you need to on Hamas, things like that. Things that might be more seen as more moderate out there in the world. But she's a Democrat, a bright blue Democrat, which brings us to the mayor's race. Someone like you, being a Republican is a handicap.
Completely.
Because, I mean, your politics are not Trumpian, right?
Let's say Trump wins the presidency. I'm the next one up if I'm the Republican candidate, if I win a primary, because I know I'll be primaried. I'm Trump to them. So now
you're Trump to who?
Everyone who hates Trump, revive the Democrats.
Right.
First Republican out of the box since the presidential election, the mayoral campaign in New York. So it doesn't matter what my opinions have been. He's a Republican. He's Trump.
Well, let's diagram it.
Yeah.
Let's put a pin on that. Harris wins. Okay. Milk and honey running through the streets of Democratic New York.
Yes.
We still have a wounded, lame duck, maybe mayor. Maybe he's running. Maybe he's not. It almost doesn't matter. At that point, maybe that's a little bit better for you. End the Trump derangement fever in the country a little bit. Then do you stand up and say, listen, I'm the face of a different Republican Party. There's going to be there's going to be no head of the party at that point. That's probably better. I mean, I know you're not rooting for this, but is that better for you?
Look, I deal with Trumpers all the time. They elected me the first time, even though I wasn't a Trumper. Mateo was flying the Trump flag.
Yeah.
They voted me overwhelmingly.
Did Trump endorse in that race?
No, he didn't. He did not.
Was there ever any danger of him doing that?
Yeah. I mean, Mateo went and visited him in New Jersey there. He was with Lieutenant General Flynn. So we assumed he was going to get the endorsement. And my attitude was, if after 45 years of service to the people of New York City, they don't understand who I am, then go with Mateo. And even the hardcore Trumpers.
But even Donald Trump himself, you and he overlap in terms of like being part of the New York firmament.
Right, but if he had endorsed Mateo, it would have made the race much closer.
Yeah.
But I still would have beaten this guy. There's no doubt. I know the Republican base in the outer boroughs. There's no more Republicans in Manhattan, Anthony. They're gone.
I know you can't say this publicly, so we'll turn off the microphones, we'll turn off the camera.
Yes.
You're secretly rooting for Harris.
I want Adams to stay as mayor. As much as I personally loathe
you want Harris to win the presidency secretly.
No, I do not want
the
Harris
microphones
to
are
win.
off. No one's listening.
Are you kidding? There's no way, Anthony. I want Harris to win.
Even though that would probably be, for your political aspirations, Mayor 2025.
It would give me less heat.
It would be less
because the Democrats would be,
Exactly. We got rid of the. There is this, every once in a while, Democrats do this thing. They did it with Hogan in Maryland.
Yes.
They did it with Cox in Utah. They did it with the guy up in Vermont, Scott. We find Republicans we don't mind so much.
Yes.
Because all we need as a Republican is to say, I don't like Donald Trump, and you're good by me. And I'm like, wait, Dick Cheney is suddenly our team? Wait, how did that happen?
Yeah, that's like, really?
All right.
Dick Cheney.
But what
Vader.
about the alternative?
Yes.
Which is Trump wins.
Yes.
He's now back for another 4 years. The electorate in this town, it doesn't matter. If you have an R next to your name, it is going to be really hard to explain
in
your way out
a
of it.
citywide election, yes.
Right.
In
I'm just saying,
pockets, no, not a problem where there's a Trump turnout. For me, if I am the survivor of a Republican primary, and again, I know my own party is going to challenge me. They don't like me. The leaders don't like me. It's anybody but Curtis. Fine. But Trump will weigh in. He'll pick somebody. It will not be me, Anthony. And so it'll be a battle for the nomination.
I don't know if he does. I mean, think of the people Donald Trump would call. He'd call Rudy Giuliani. He'd call John Katzimatidis. He'd call the machas of the Republican world that he respects. He knows New York.
They're going to pick a business person. You know that.
Do you think John Katzimatidis runs?
He might. You know, he says he wants to. But I've said, even though he's our boss, in the ring of fire, everybody. Bloomberg put out this poll of his own.
I saw that.
With his guy, Kevin Sheehan. Come on, Bloomberg.
Well, Bloomberg he can't go back to run as Republican
let me tell
now.
you something. This last election, he almost lost it to Billy Thompson, who had no money. That's when he stole another 4 years.
Look, you know my background here. I ran in 2005, came close, decided not to contest.
You would have beaten him.
I don't believe that, but okay. But 2009, after he had flipped term limits, he was you forget, he ran for president as a Democrat, got the American Samoa one electoral vote.
Elizabeth Warren eviscerated him twice.
Yeah.
And remember, he's at a cocktail party. Oh, it's, Madam Black there. Oh, you're new. Vanity Fair. Oh, Oprah recommended you. How would you like to be the head of the Department of Education? Remember that?
I do remember that.
That was
that woman. Who
Black.
was,
I think her name.
No,
was.
I thought, with the Asian woman though.
No, the white woman that he.
Oh yes, I remember.
Recommended by Oprah. All she did was publish magazines.
It's funny. There are certain candidates that the newspapers love, and there's a disconnect on Bloomberg. The New York Times loves Mike Bloomberg. The regular voters out there, very mixed. He's very detached. They didn't like that he overturned term limits. They didn't like how aloof he was. He, a Boston Red Sox fan. Everything.
You can't be the mayor of New York City and Bermuda.
Well, also, you say you want a third term, Mr. Mayor. Third term. There's term limits. Whether you like them or don't like them, they do generally reflect is when people start.
And not only that. Let's remember his anointed one, Christine Quinn, with the glow in the dark.
Who's back, by the way? She's back. Her name. She's floating her name.
But still, he got her the editorial endorsements of every newspaper.
Right.
She was on his way to victory. You announced, even after you left Congress, boom, you shot right to the head.
Right.
Nobody liked Christine Quinn. Nobody liked it. Didn't matter that Bloomberg embraced her.
All right. Now that's two scenarios. One is that Trump wins. One is that Harris wins. Let me give a third scenario, which is sometime after November, the first Tuesday in November, the mayor of the city of New York, Eric Adams, says, you know what? I'm packing my bags. I'm leaving. There's going to be a special election. Now, special elections are unusual in this town. No primaries, jungle situation.
Sprint.
No one. But not only that, in a maybe the best possible scenario for Curtis Sliwa, you get to run on the Guardian Party rather than the Republican Party because it's nonpartisan. You make up your own silly name.
Will the Cleveland Guardians let me do
You'll
that?
probably get sued. Now, that actually might not be, and it's ranked choice voting, means people vote their top 5 choices. If no one in the first gets 50% or 50%, I think it is, then this.
It's like a bingo card.
Best possible scenario for you think?
It could be. There'll be 50 or more people in it. Like, remember the nonpartisan election that replaced Gray Davis with Arnold Schwarzenegger 25 years ago? There were like 50 candidates.
Yes, but here's the difference. The number of candidates doesn't matter in ranked choice voting because if you get 5 votes, you have no impact on what goes on at the top.
It's either going to be a lot of money and name recognition. Those are the people who have the advantage.
And you have a lot of name recognition.
Oh, yeah. I mean, look, I didn't come out of this last election cycle with Democrats hating me. Notice there was no hate. I just like Eric Adams better. That's fine. I can go into any community. I was well received. Just said I really think Eric Adams.
But you have hundreds and hundreds of hours of saying dopey things on the radio.
Yeah.
Wouldn't that be a problem?
Well, what are you going to do? Take all of that back? It's done, Anthony.
No, but I'm just saying we're trying to game it out. Like a pundit might game it out.
You can play whatever I've said over the years.
And now with AI, they can probably just feed all of your tapes in.
But you know what, Anthony?
Yeah.
You know, there's something that you can say that I said the last time around that you will never hear Trump, Andrew Cuomo, or Eric Adams say. I was wrong. I made a mistake.
Well, here's the other.
And guess what? They go on.
Well,
when you vacillate and I was half right, half no. If you're wrong, you're wrong.
Well,
let's move on.
And as important, and I'm a student of mayors. I ran for it several times, 2 times. One of the things I think that New Yorkers say is that, and Ed Koch paraphrased this by saying, if you agree with me on 8 out of 10 things, vote for me. 10 out of 10 things, you should get your head examined. But what they really want is someone who's going to stand in there and take the slings and arrows if they think they're right, because there's so many guys like Scott Stringer and the like who would just say yes to whoever the last person that came into the room is not what they want. And I think as someone who's watched you could say something else. You didn't come and go in business. I'm off to the Hamptons. I'm off to doing something else. I've been here the entire time. My roots. The roots of New York City, like, go up through my feet into my lungs, and that's something that I think is different than any other candidate, and I think that's something you'll be able to say.
I think I have the streets. Unfortunate for me is most people in the streets are not registered to vote and don't vote. The other power brokers, they got the suites, and they think they can sway an election. But I think this time around, people have had enough of that. You know, Adams embraced by Wall Street. You know, de Blasio, he was going to be different. But it's too much of the hypocrisy.
Well, then there's the other thing. I always say to candidates who come and ask me for advice, think of the things you're going to say on that stage, metaphorically or literal, that none of the other candidates can say. And I can see you standing on a stage with 18 and 10. If you want another politician with all the problem that politicians have gotten into, vote for one of these guys. Right. But if you want someone who is really going to suddenly put New Yorkers first, not care about political deals, I got no one to make a deal with because no one's supporting me.
Exactly.
That kind of vibe.
That's brilliant.
And I think that you can really have a lot of it. Now, I would eat this microphone before I voted for you. However, I really do respect that you may get a chance to put yourself out there. And the final thing, we only have 15 or 20 seconds. Is Eric Adams done, you think? Toast? If not by you, but by someone else?
In the future.
Do you think he sticks around for the year?
Oh, what else is he going to do?
And do you think he even files and tries to run for re-election?
Yes.
And do you think he is mortally wounded?
I believe so. And I think there are enough of his fellow Democrats who smell the blood in the water, and they will go on a full-scale attack.
Of the people that have expressed interest, who would get number 2 on your ballot right now?
You mean who has the best chance?
No. Who would you vote number 2? You're going to vote Sliwa, vote for yourself. Who would you put number 2 on your ballot?
You mean I don't get to vote for myself twice?
You do.
Yeah. As a Democrat, I think I can vote that.
All right. Well, listen, just to protect you from having to answer that question, I really do appreciate you being with us on Left versus Right. Stay tuned for Vinny Medugno.